Thank you, Nola. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you today. First of all, I want to acknowledge the great work that our faculty and our staff and our students have done in really driving the success of the institution. A lot of our success is because collectively the representation and the work that you do has really made a difference in how the external community, our future students, see us. But before I go on, I also want to take a moment to follow up with Nola's thank of Dr. Luke Wood. One of the things that I think is incredible is when I look at the progress and support Luke has contributed mightily to this institution. If we look at student support, student engagement, if we look at our equity gaps that we have really been at the forefront of the system in, when we look at even our strategic vision in our strategic plan, which Luke played a critical role there, looking at, and as you know, equity, inclusion, and everything we do is really an intersection, not just in terms of words, but in terms of action. So, you know, I could go on and on about Luke, but I want to publicly thank him. And I also am very grateful that in this process of moving forward with our national search, that he is willing to stay so that we will have his leadership to ensure a smooth transition. And I also am very excited about your scholarly accomplishments and your future. Luke, at a national stage, is an incredible contributor in the area of research with in his area of looking at the success of particularly young Black men in community colleges. But more importantly, he really is committed to affecting the policy arena at a national and at a state level, and he is doing that. So in that vein, I am just so proud of his commitment to the institution and his presence, and the College of Education, I know, is welcoming him with open arms because he has touched so many lives and will continue to touch many lives. So thank you, Luke. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. And a moment of applause here. So I also want to talk about in this meeting, the evolving, if you will, direction of CSU. I think Nola touched on some of the enrollment issues. I also want to say that it's interesting in that the fact that even though at a national and at a statewide level, we're seeing these enrollment trends, when we look at how we are propelling forward in our own ability to propel ourselves to an R1 status, special in a very special and unique way. And when we look at how we've landed the top 8% of R2 institutions, we're really close to that cusp of pursuing the R1 classification. We've done it in a very unique way, I think ahead of the curve through different private-public partnerships with our links and strong links with the community, and of course with the incredible brilliance of our faculty and our students as well. So I do want to take a moment to shift in the enrollment discussion and highlighting, of course, that this is a national, this is a state, this is not something unique. But one of the things that's important to understand is that we are part of a 23 university system. And I'm going to repeat the words of our wonderful interim chancellor, Kester, in that the system itself is in an existential crisis because of the rapid overall drop of enrollment in terms of not just headcount, but FTES, meaning students taking full loads. And even we are looking at working with our students, whether they're graduate, undergraduate students, to ensure that they take the full load so that they can graduate here at SDSU. The point here is that with this downward trend, we are becoming much more aware of the fact that how the other campuses, largely in the northern states, are going to be affected in terms of their ability to move forward in a financial model that's sustainable over time. Certainly, one of the outcomes of the declining enrollment, and just as a reminder, when we signed the compact, the 5-year compact with the governor, there was an agreement to increase overall enrollment of FTS within the system. The system did not meet this, although campuses did, and San Diego State has been on target and continues to be on target. And we hope to be above target as we grow down the road. So having said that, I want to remind you that in the last 5 years, we are the only campus that has grown by 1,800 students. So now we're at roughly about 36,600 student head count. So we are distinct. We're one of the top 10 applied universities in the country. But I say that recognizing that what Nola had mentioned is that there is a bubble that will occur in 2 years when the high school enrollment declines, and it will directly affect our capacity to serve as a system, the state in the way that the governor has outlined in its compact. The other issue that is already occurring, and Stefan Hyman can speak to this in more detail, that overall community college transfer rates have gone down. So even within San Diego State, even though we have a large pool, what we're seeing is that the applications for transfer are declining as well. So this started beyond the pandemic. So it started before the pandemic, right? So it is not something that occurred as a result, but the pandemic clearly hasn't helped the situation. The second point, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but one of the things that I have noticed going now to more the national meetings with some of the other presidents, but also talking to lobbyists involved in all the higher ed national organizations, is that there is a declining perception of the return on investment in higher education. It is a major cultural shift that we're seeing where it isn't necessarily the perspective of one party or the other, but indeed a shared idea that we are not stewarding our resources in a way where the investment for the student implies that they are going to move through their professional paths in the best way forward. And of course, what happens is that this is linked to skyrocketing cost of education, because for the last 30 years, and most of you know this, states have divested in higher education. And by that, by doing that, it has created the need for many institutions to increase tuition and fees. Now, we as a campus and a system have not really increased tuition in the last 10 years. However, when we move forward and we look at the future here, we also know that one of the biggest issues for our faculty and staff is really issues of compensation. Indeed, particularly with the inflation that we see today, and I would say uniformly, all the presidents agree, when we look at compensation issues, when we look even hiring, we have a lot of vacancies here on our campus where the salaries are not competitive. So we recognize that these are very real factors and that this is going to be a difficult time for the system in how we move forward. And of course, we're in the process, in the middle of a national search to replace the chancellor, who's going to have to look at these things very carefully. So one of the things, of course, when we look at this year in particular, is that we are doing well in terms of our budget because of our balance of out-of-state and in-state students, and the fact that we've been able to be effective in enrolling and meeting target. That being said, even with that, we are underfunded per FTE because of the fact that many of our programs, whether it's in counseling or whether they're in the laboratory sciences, or even in the College of Business, we are just not, our expenditures exceed the revenue we receive. So I think this is going to be a turbulent time, meaning there is going to be robust discussion about tuition increases. There'll be robust discussion on how that may be implemented. And indeed, most likely, if there is something that occurs here, it will be probably a cohort-based model. That is not a decision that I make as a president. It is a decision that the Board of Trustees and the system will make. The one thing that I think we need to be aware of is that San Diego State per FTES is paid the least out of the operating budget out of the system. So as we move forward, we are going to be looking at how indeed we can possibly differentiate ourselves in order to ensure that we can still keep the boat afloat, if you will. And then I am optimistic on that, but I want to be very clear that the challenging times are here. And indeed, as part of a system, the boat, it floats together or not at all. I wanted to provide this overview because one of the things that I had asked NOLA to do and had mentioned to the SEC is as we look at what the cost of or the expenditures for different programs are, as we look at the college level, as we start looking at some of these factors that are influencing our students to enter majors or not enter majors, we want to have a broader, committee structure to start with, small committee structure to start with, working with NOLA, but a broader ones that will go into the colleges to begin to critically assess where we as a campus need to move forward to maintain not only our strategic investments and support of faculty, staff, and students, but to really look at the future with a lens of where there is real opportunity for growth and where indeed there may not be the opportunities of growth for the future. And I think that is something that I would like us to do collectively as a campus, as opposed to being in a position where it's top down from the board down to the system. And we know that that's always been very difficult for campuses. Now, why do I say that? I think that there are some issues at some of the campuses that are so significant in terms of funding that if we look at states around us, and this is not unusual, you can talk to colleagues in different states where there may be minimum enrollment requirements placed, and I'm not saying this is happening, but as we look at the crisis, as we look at a chancellor, there's going to be some difficult conversations. And I do think the cost and the participation and the demand, if you will, from students will be playing a greater role. I also think that if we ourselves are not forward thinking, there's also legislature that will be looking at the compact, which is a 5-year agreement based on very specific performance metrics. At the end of the day, I think we have a unique opportunity here at San Diego State. And that is an opportunity that through shared governance, we can bring in and begin this narrative. This is ringing the bell a little early, right? But I do think that because we're in a position, the conversations we can have can be far more meaningful in the future. So are there opportunities for us, for example, to look at leveraging online pedagogies? Are there opportunities in the realm of artificial intelligence? Can we work with our team in helping and support and use AI in order to help us with some issues? Obviously, we've heard about Chatbox, but Chatbox is here to stay, right? But there are other opportunities. I think some of these discussions may be painful, so I don't want to sugarcoat anything, but I do think we can talk about these. And one example I'm giving, just because I'm giving the example doesn't mean it will happen, but I do know that presidents in the northern campuses are talking about this. A BS in mechanical engineering can be shared in 2 different campuses. Is that an option? Can you do that, right? Are there programs in one part of the country or one part of the state, actually one part of the state, where if it's being offered on one campus, do you need to offer it in another campus? These are discussions that we are having collectively as presidents as we look forward to creating these opportunities. The other area that is being discussed, and we are discussing it here in San Diego State internally, is using shared services. The College of Science has agreed to pilot this. So I want to also thank the Dean of the College of Science, Dean Roberts, for willing to pilot this. We're looking at this in terms of procurement, because procurement has been, for a lot of departments, a problem because of the time period it's taken to get orders through. So we're looking at these with an idea that if we can create the types of organizational efficiencies, that also will help us in the long run. When we look at Mission Valley and the future of Mission Valley, what we also recognize now as we launch the Innovation District, we now have, again, an opportunity to start building how do we partner with industry in order to co-invest in wet labs. They're incredibly expensive, right? These are very expensive investments. How do we create the kinds of programs that will allow our students to slide into, for example, biotech, because they'll be working side by side with industry. So these are all things that I think are going to create an opportunity for us to diversify. And as we look at capital expenditures, and one of the areas that we have been looking at is North Life Sciences. When we look at the process by which the state makes a determination for investment in a building, is there a way that we can work with the system to expedite it? Because we know that the longer we wait to build a building, the rate of inflation is such that it can go up 10 to 15% per year with the cost of construction. So there are many things that we are looking at. We need to really think in terms of how we fund to best serve our students and our faculty, how we can share resources, how we can create the choices that, again, create the interest and enthusiasm. But as I said, I do think that we are in a very unique position. And I do think that the opportunity for us can be one of a thoughtful direction for the future. In light of this, I also want to say that, as you all know, this is a year that we are going to making decisions on collective bargaining. Again, this is at the system-wide level, but the process for negotiation across many of the unions, as well as reopeners for CFA, will occur. Luckily, again, we have been very prudent. We have, been very clear in modeling the financial reality. But I also think we need to recognize that the system will not be able to provide all the operating budget. The governor did not agree to create the funding stream of recurring dollars for compensation. And with the budget reality, this is going to make it very difficult for us to cover all the costs. So I want to again bring forward that the discussion of the tuition increase is going to be very, very important for the future compensation and growth for our faculty as well. I want to end with a couple of comments because I know time is somewhat limited. I do want to say that we have been able to have record levels of philanthropy. The performance data that we have, I'll ask Luke to share, is really remarkable in terms of how we've had equity gaps reduced. And of course, when we look at the gaps between our Black African-American students, we are number one in the system with a reduction of gaps. I also want to mention the fact that we are moving forward and leading into issues of looking at gender-based violence, and we now have a Blue Ribbon Committee chair, and Monica Casper will be leading that. So we will be very proactive in that area as well. I also wanted to share with you, with this new direction and opportunity, we'll be looking at research-informed, action-driven approaches to develop a strategy to really focus on these societally norms and behaviors that affect behaviors of our students and our broader community. So I really look forward to working with Monica, and her leadership will be very key in these conversations and actions. At the same time, we will be convening our COSN implementation team to meet for the first time in March. This is a system-wide evaluation of policies and practices of Title IX in the system as well as on campuses. Let me remind you that this is really looking at policies and practices, and that's why the gender-based violence is a broader approach that we are also initiating. The team that we have right now will be made up of the chair of our chair, Nola Butler Bird, an additional Senate nominated leader. There'll be 2 student-nominated leaders and content experts from across campus, and they will be meeting with the COSN team. And we have sent out the survey that we have asked to the broader campus to participate in. We expect our first meeting will be the first week of March, where the COSN team will share with us our campus-specific themes and recommendations. I do think that we are, again, well-positioned, so I want to leave with a positive note that oftentimes positive change, growth is incremental, and sometimes it can be difficult, but I think we have the right people. I think we have the right culture. I do think we can connect with a purpose that is fairly solid. And I do think with that, change can always occur in a much easier fashion. I'm very, very proud of the values and principles and purpose that we have at this institution. And I do think that we are going to move forward through this difficult enrollment challenge, which again is framed within a broader system approach. And in my role as president, working with other presidents, as much as I'm an advocate for SDSU, I understand the value and the importance of these other campuses for those communities as well. I do want to end and acknowledge the contributions of the members of our Black community and to encourage you to participate in also many of the events that we have scheduled in honor of Black History Month this February. Nola, I want to also thank you for launching and providing context and perspective. I really felt that was really important. I give my honor and appreciation to members of the Africana Studies Department who have been incredible leaders, and the Black Resource Center, who've been so critical in really the planning and support, again, with Dr. Luke Wood and his team. I think this is really an important moment for us to recognize that we're coming together to celebrate the contributions and achievements of those within the Black community. And it is our responsibility, each of us, to understand how we can and must continue to drive equity and improve the conditions for members of our Black community. And I want to echo and again, support the recommendations that Chair Byrd has brought forward. Thank you again. I want to make sure that if there are any questions or comments, I can answer them at this moment and leave some time. So I cut short my presentation, but I always enjoy the interaction with the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, President De La Torre. We do have a couple of hands up for questions. I do want to ask our SEC members to try to give our Senate members priority since they haven't had an opportunity to engage with President De La Torre. Senator Somé, you are the first hand up. Please.
Okay, thanks. I'll be quick. Well, thanks very much for your report, President De La Torre, and I appreciate the fact that we are doing well in our enrollment. Unfortunately, as 7 other campuses that are really not doing that well, and so they're going to be getting less money for the next few years, I think. But my question, I have 2 questions, actually. Actually, one is a comment and one is a real question. As you may be well aware of the fact that by law, AB 927, the community colleges are now allowed to offer BA degrees. And I'm just wondering what steps are made from our campus so that there is no duplication of degrees, given, the enrollment crisis that we are facing maybe, and so on and so forth. So that's one. The other one is, I was wondering whether next time when the Senate meets, there could be a report on how the IVC campus is managing to negotiate with the local industries to work with the campus at IVC, as we talked about it at the beginning of the year. I just wanted to know what developments have been made since the beginning of the semester last year. Thank you.
Annika, those are excellent questions. Let me answer the first question. One of the issues that surfaced when the legislation passed for the community colleges was that it was the guardrails, if you were not clearly specified. The system has been very mindful that when we talk about the support of a new bachelor's degree, it isn't just in the local area. So for example, we know San Diego Community College is going to offer a cybersecurity bachelor's degree, and that's been announced. There hasn't, in my mind, and this is my opinion, a clear mechanism or development of the guardrails. I think that needs to happen legislatively. The CO office will work on that because the legislative action is very important. Now, I want to juxtapose it because we are moving forward with the independent doctoral degree, and that has moved forward. And even UC, from what I have heard, has been neutral. Now, I say neutral, meaning they're not actively opposing it, from my knowledge. And that will move forward, but we were very specific in anticipation of objections with the UC to put appropriate guardrails so there would not be duplication, but also allow us to move forward as a system with those types of opportunities. So to answer your question, we need more tools in our toolbox. That's going to have to be a legislative action. I think the system is well aware, as well as the faculty, but it is something that I can tell you that the system is going to be looking at. On the second question, which is again an excellent question, I think what I will ask is AVP Biltong to present on how we will be moving forward, particularly with the Brawley campus, with the P3s, which actually a lot of what we're building in that area is really linked to the Lithium Valley expansion, the governor's vision. So there is a very interesting way in which we're handling this, and I'm going to ask Bill for the next Senate meeting to present that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Senator Chair Rifus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Butler. You mentioned the Cozen report and that Chair Butler Bird and another faculty and 2 students would sit on that and review it or do something. I'm not sure the exact language. How come there are no staff on that committee? Is that because they weren't included in the original study?
You know what? I believe in the chat there is an answer to that because I asked right there, Todd. So thank you for the question. To provide a more full update on the recommended implementation team composition, it is to include experts from counseling, representation from UPD, staff expertise from Title IX, staff expertise from student rights and responsibilities, faculty represented from the Senate, and student representation. So that is where the staff representation will be.
Okay.
Did you have a follow-up, Chair Rifus?
I guess follow-up is, why was the staff, who are sometimes the face of various departments, if someone were to have a Title IX claim, they might go to the department and say, hey, I had some trouble, can you help me? But because we're the face of the campus, but none of the staff were included in the Cozen report initially when they came to campus, we weren't even told they were coming.
Indeed, this was structured within the CO office protocol. Remember, this is not driven by the campuses. And so Jessica Rento, and I think, Jessica, are you on by any chance? Who is our staff liaison? I don't know if Jessica is here. Is she at all? Worked with the CO office in order to do this. So the report will be shared with the full campus, but the protocol really was defined by the CO office.
President, yes, I understand that CO did do the protocol, but it's my understanding that 3 or 4 campuses that I know of included staff in their Cozen process, at least 3 or 4.
Well, we can also engage, I think, with the staff affairs. And if you'd like, I will bring that to Jessica, because if that's a recommendation, I will bring it back to Jessica as a liaison and see how we can incorporate your recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kelly, you recognize?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, you said something that you were talked about all boats floating. But our department has been sinking fast while we've seen a lot of growth in other areas of the campus, including particularly administrative growth. And I find it, this 2000, the Great Recession was back in 2008. And one of the reasons for the demographic plunge was because people stopped having so many children because they couldn't afford them. And so we've seen this demographic thing coming from a long time now. And I'm rather disappointed that we've been expanding campuses and they're expanding them all over the place just before we should have seen this thing coming. And I'm further disappointed that one of our main goals is to go back to the old standby, which is that we're going to have fewer people teaching more classes, which is sort of classic, sort of capitalist behavior where you're just like, well, we got to do austerity, so we got to cut the workers and make them work harder, or we can replace them with robots and AI. In fact, I think we should be going the exact opposite direction. So for instance, ChatGPT can write code beautifully now. ChatGPT can write your papers for you. ChatGPT can do these things. And that isn't good for the students. That is actually really quite dangerous. What we really need to be doing is to counter this, what do we have that an AI doesn't have? What we have are human. We have human capital. So I can do hands-on education that a computer can't do. I can ask questions in small discussion groups that a computer can't do. We should have people communicating in small groups with their faculty, working with their mentors, getting the hands-on one-on-one education that they really deserve and they should be paying for. And that's where we've always excelled. So, so these are the things that I think, really we're going to go, the way the words I hear are very classic sort of business kind of crush labor and send the, and keep the money up with the bosses. I mean, that's classic kind of stuff that I'm hearing here, which is really disappointing for our students. The other thing I'd like to add is if every time, looks like another opportunity to cut staff and cut faculty, because the last time we have even a whiff of having a budget crisis, we slashed our staff. We lost 24 staff members or something in the college, and we never got them back. So you say the faculty are working hard, but the one reason we're having trouble is because we have no staff. And I think this is going to be yet another opportunity to get rid of staff, to get rid of faculty, when we need to be doing the opposite for these students. And so one of my questions is, are we going to have a concomitant reduction in the administration, which has been exploding on this campus and every other? And every AVP you add is like adding 3 faculty members in salary. Are we going to see a strategy that includes, like, why do we need so many administrators if we have fewer faculty and staff? And I'm also worried that we're going to say, well, we don't have any money, so let's just throw more fees on the students, which is going to make it even harder for students to come here. So can you respond to that, please?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, you have a lot of broad issues here. Certainly, we will bring them up to discuss in the context of future planning. I think for the system itself, you're talking about a situation that is incredibly difficult because of the fact that without tuition, without operating budget, the discussion is going to be a painful discussion. That being said, I do think that we are in a very different position than the other campuses. How we look at these issues, and as an economist, I have to say, we are in a capitalist system. We have to understand that we're in a market system. That has not changed.
We're not a market system. We're a nonprofit university. That's ridiculous.
You know what? I would appreciate if you would interrupt me, because I did not interrupt you. So if you want to have me answer a question, please allow me to speak. So the context is that this is an environment where individual students are making choices. We have been able to fortunately move forward. We have used our resources in a prudent manner. And indeed, per FTES, and I am not proud of this, but the system itself has not funded us at the same level. So in that context, how do we prepare for the future, knowing that we have sister institutions that are going to be suffering? It's going to be a conversation, and that conversation will be with the committee moving forward. So thank you, and I appreciate your comments.
Okay, we have one more hand up. Senator Stoskopf, you're recognized.
Oh, you can't see me anyway, so okay, I listened to this discussion and I kind of feel I don't know that the CSU knows what it really wants to be. The original mission of the CSU was to be very student friendly, have lots of faculty, train students for the workforce of the state of California. And what I see is we're trying to develop this. And what's this new Brawley? I mean, we're just saying how we don't have enough students at our campuses. So let's build another campus. It's like, what the hell? That doesn't even make any sense. And then, oh, we're going to be an R01 university. And oh, we're going to want to keep our 36,000 students because, you know, we're so good at providing students. Well, where I am, there's just a handful of faculty left to actually deal with students. Everybody else has an R01, but none of that money trickles back to the school. So it doesn't help us fill in where we need help with addressing student needs. My students are constantly saying, we can't find anybody. Where do people go? And I just feel like the underlying issue is maybe you need to retrench and say, what is it that we were supposed to do? Let's do that and do it really well, rather than saying we don't have enough money, but at the same time trying to strategically expand everything. And it just, of course you don't have enough money. I mean, this is the state of California. And how do we redistribute the overhead for the R01s? Do they ever get back to places where we actually need them to do the core function of faculty, which is teaching and mentoring students and supervising them in their research and all the things that only faculty do on this campus? So I kind of feel like there's this huge overstretch of trying to be everything to everybody, rather than stepping back and saying, we built a wonderful reputation at the university to be here to provide good education programs to students who are going to work in the state of California. And maybe if we take care of our core function, some of these other things will begin to work themselves out a little bit better. I just feel, you know, if somebody says, what does your university do? It's like, well, I can't really tell, but I don't think teaching would be at the top of my list of things that we do. You know, I think that a lot of faculty would agree with that. Now, with your new My SDSU, we're also doing tons of administration in a computer that used to be done by other people. And it's like, we just can't be everything to everybody all the time. And I don't feel that there's leadership to say, okay, let's decide what we're really going to do first and foremost, so that we can kind of have a stable pillar here before branching out. I just feel we're kind of in disarray about direction.
So I appreciate your comments. I do think as we look forward, one of the opportunities again as the Senate is to bring these and articulate these issues in a clearer way so that we can move forward. I do think one of the big issues that we're facing on the campus is that we're dealing with a reality where we are actually doing reasonably well. And this is what makes it a little more difficult for us compared to our peer institutions. And as we move forward, we're really looking at public-private partnerships. So the Brawley campus was a decision and was supported by the governor with the idea that it would grow similar to the Mission Valley project, which has been very, very successful in terms of the investment moving forward. In fact, Hala can speak about the Innovation District. The Brawley campus is similarly linked to the Lithium Valley concept as well. The nursing program that was introduced has already exceeded expectations. And indeed, we're moving forward very successfully with compacts in terms of bringing in students from the Imperial Valley. So I think one of the things that would be important, and I will ask the provost to speak to this as well, is as we meet with chairs, providing more specificity of what we are doing. I do think that communication of this is very important. With regard to, and I know Jerry will talk to the new PeopleSoft conversion. Let me recall that 4 years ago, when I came here, San Diego State had chosen not to introduce PeopleSoft. But the problem was that without this particular platform, we could no longer continue getting Pell Grants through the Department of Education. The system itself did not have the right interface. We were faced with a crisis. This is not unusual, but it is a different system. Obviously, you know, it is never easy to change enterprise systems. We would never even suggest that. But I had lived through that actually with UC Davis. We had a similar program. We were the original banner campus within the UC. It was built out individually by different departments. It had a lot of bells and whistles. When the Department of Education said you can no longer use a platform, we were forced to change, and it was a difficult transition. I don't want to minimize that, but I do think that there was a reason to do that. Obviously, if we could have continued with Sims, it would have been a different approach. But we were the only campus, and there was no support structure that we could move forward with to allow us to move forward with our financial aid, that system that was critical for our students as well. So I just want, I'll have Jerry can speak to that. Maybe Jerry, do you want to talk about that?
Thanks, President. I've got an update here in a few minutes. I'll go through and then happy to take questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm not seeing any additional questions. Thank you, President De La Torre, for your report.
Thank you all, and I appreciate the time.
We're going to move on now to the Provost Report. Provost Ochoa is recognized.
Thank you, Nola. I'd like to highlight a few things. I know there's a long agenda, so I'll try to be brief. First is our enrollment for the spring, and I'm hoping you can put the slides up, and I've asked Stefan to go over 4 brief slides to give you an overview of how we are doing with our enrollment. Stefan and Marius, can you put up those slides?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'll be very brief. Our current enrollment as of this morning, 33,683 students, which is a little over 1,000 above where we were in spring 2022. You may recall that in fall 2022, we were about 900, a little over 900 students ahead of where we were in fall 2021. So generally speaking, this growth of 900 is modestly higher, but generally the spring is a shadow of the fall semester. Census is about a week away, so at that point, these numbers will become locked. Next slide, please. We look at where that growth has taken place. This is looking at census data for spring 2019 through spring 2022 versus where we were again as of yesterday. The numbers technically as of Sunday, but the numbers did not change because we're in the period of only administrative changes. And the majority of the growth at the undergraduate level, which is also what we saw in the fall semester. Next slide, please. At this time, again, unofficial, but right now it's looking like our first term retention rate for first term students who first started in fall 2022 is 96.7%, very, very strong, higher than the last couple of years. And our first term retention rate for our transfer students also very strong, 96.2%.
Thank you, Stefan. So what we right now we're on target to be at 99.8 of our enrollment target, and that could shift. So I think if we look at our overall FTE, what we predicted were 12 students above what we predicted our FTE would be for the spring semester. So I want to thank everyone who worked on that. We do have a very healthy application pool for these next year. The other thing I want to talk about real quickly is the RPT process. There's 95 faculty that are being reviewed either for 3rd year or for promotion tenure to associate or promotion to full. And I'm in the midst of working through those, reading some incredible files. Our faculty are doing great work. I do anticipate that the 30-year reviews will be going out. I've worked nonstop on those to get feedback to those faculty soon, and those should be going out in the near future. The other thing is that we did talk about teleworking in academic affairs, and I met with student leaders, with chairs, with deans, and we have sent out earlier in the year, I think 2 weeks ago, an email to department chairs and to deans about teleworking within academic affairs and units, and they are supposed to see what works for them and submit those to HR. So we have allowed greater flexibility. In terms of faculty searches, we are tracking ahead of target than what we did last year. We have 60 ongoing faculty searches. We've already filled 10. A lot of them, I expect this month will be a very critical month. And I want to thank everyone for working through those factors. Dean searches, well, faculty searches for next year. I've already let NOLA know that we are having the retreat on April the 5th. And that will be a joint meeting between a Senate representative, the Senate chairs of the 5 standing committees, and at least one Senate representative from each college, where they provide feedback and they hear all the deans. And this, although the Senate policy says they have to consult, we go beyond that. They participate and they vote just like deans do, the Senate, to provide a recommendation for that. Each dean provides a rationale in a spirit of shared governance and openness so that everybody knows what every college is requesting. That process worked last year and I thought it was very inclusive. And then I debriefed with the Senate Tenure Track Planning Committee after they saw the results so that I can get their reflections and comments before those final decisions were made. Once we meet in April, we'll collect that data. I'll debrief with the Senate and we can proceed earlier. That was a request from the College of Business and the Senate to get started earlier in the hiring process. The only drawback to that is that sometimes we don't know people who FERPed and we don't know people who've resigned. So this we'll have a list and then we'll see, follow that list as openings become available. The other thing, we do have 2 dean searches going on right now. We are going to be naming in the near future the candidates who will be coming for the PSFA dean search. We're working on naming those finalists in the near future, and Global Campus is proceeding as normal. NOLA, as a Senate representative, is working with Bill about, we have several deans that are going for their reviews this year. And NOLA is working as a Senate representative about the process of the instrument that will be used. So that is going very, very well. The other thing I wanted to say is that, again, just to provide clarification on sabbaticals, we had 70 people apply, and of those, in the collective bargain, we only have to give 37. We're awarding 46, so we're giving 9 additional. Most of those are in Cal and sciences because we want every college to have about a 65% acceptance rates of everybody who've applied. And overall, 66% of the people who applied for sabbatical got one. And those additional sabbaticals, we're providing funding so that we can make sure that faculty, there's been a backlog due to COVID. And I want to remind people real briefly that there will be a town hall on space on February the 15th, 16th, and 24th of this month, excuse me. To get spaces become very, very critical. And we've hired, the administration's hired a consultant and they're meeting with the chairs tomorrow. So if you have concerns, please talk to your chairs if you cannot go to that meeting or one of those forums. And we're also having a research infrastructure assessment town hall that will be hosted by Halima Danat, our VP for Research, on February 17th from 1 to 2:30 to look at our research infrastructure needs. And I think Hala will be posting that Zoom link on the chat. So we have a lot going on. I just want to be very brief, Nola, and see if there's questions, but I want to express my appreciation to you about how we're working with the Senate on the dean review process and how we're working with the Senate to the allocation of future lines. I think that's a real partnership, and I want to thank you for your cooperation and your assistance with that. So I'll keep it, and there's more that we can go on, but I'm trying to keep the key highlights. You told me to be brief. I'm doing my best.
Now, thank you, Provost Ochoa, for your succinct report. And I'm not seeing any hands up, so I think we will move on to the next report. Thank you very much. Vice President of IT and Chief Information Officer Report, VP IT Sheehan is recognized.
Thanks very much, Chair Butler Bird. Want to give an update on my SDSU. Want to talk briefly about where we ended with grading, give an overview of the first use of Explorers Blue, talk about financial aid distribution, waitlist, general permissions, where we are in admissions right now with the use of my SDSU, and support priorities. I'll be brief and data-driven in this overview. So talking first about end of semester grading, one of the first milestones that we had was the use of my SDSU for grading, replicating functionality that was there before, had a number of faculty who went through training voluntarily so they could learn approach in the new system. The data was overwhelmingly positive, likely because of that faculty engagement. We had a little over 260 outstanding grades in my SDSU in December. If you jump back to the last time that SIMS was used, similar timeframe, we had 770. Again, the thought being that it was the interest in this and the first time use that drove those numbers down. Right now, there are 50 report delayed grades that are still outstanding. Those need to go back to the Office of the Registrar. They get submitted via Adobe Sign. So very positive in terms of the use of the system for entering grades. Moving next to end of the course evaluations. So when we shifted away from our legacy systems in SIM-R, it meant that the university needed a new course evaluation platform. We were no longer going to be able to use what had been written in web portal. We went through a piloting through the Senate Information Instructional Technology Group, chose a tool called Explorers Blue. That tool was brought online and used at the end of this first semester. The use of the platform was different than we have done in the past. Let me talk about some of the technical and then some of the policy differences. So from a technical standpoint, the system allowed us to automate the launch of all of the course evaluations. Departmental coordinators didn't need to do that as they had done in the past. We also, from a policy perspective, decided that due to concerns expressed in various academic settings, talked about in academic affairs, also talked about in the Senate, that we were going to shorten the time frame that we had for end of course evaluation so there wouldn't be an overlap with when students could potentially see their grades. That shortened this window to a 7-day time frame. And then because it was the first use of the system and we were automating data in between, there are a number of courses that were evaluated that in all reality probably should have been exempted. These are things like independent studies, some very small size classes. So modification being done there. When we look at the overall response rates, based on those changes, both in the duration and the depth of what we're evaluating, we ended up with just about a 35% response rate. We went back and compared that to what the historical practice had been. And remember that the historical practice at SDSU also withheld from students their ability to see grades early unless they completed a survey. Looking at the last 3 years worth of data, the response rates using that lever were 55%. So we saw a distinct difference of about 20%. When we saw that difference, we had a consultation with academic affairs, also with the CFA, and decided that for this semester, given the first use and the change in time frame, that evaluations for this cycle would be something that could be used by faculty, but would not be required to be used. And Joanna's certainly here. We can talk about that in more depth. She's been the lead on those conversations, but that is what the data showed in terms of the difference of use. We know that we want to have an academic policy conversation about when we want to administer evaluations. In the CSU, there are a few different models that are used, discretely different than what SDSU has done. The standard models that are used are either to evaluate after or before grades in discrete chunks to avoid the conflict that we had talked about. So we're looking forward to having that conversation. Would also say that faculty anecdotally have been positive on the data that's coming out of the end of course evaluations, and that data was just shared with department heads and others earlier this week, so the first time that folks have seen it. That moves us into financial aid. And as the president said, the justification, the clear and present danger that made us change systems was really going to be our inability to grant financial aid. And if you look at what we have been able to do for the spring semester, right now we have 19,610 students who have been granted over $128 million in grants, scholarships, loans, and waivers. The total for this academic year is $303 million worth of financial aid that we've been able to distribute. That's the criticality of this to our students. Also want to talk a little bit about the middle class scholarship. So the middle class scholarship is a state aid scholarship. As we were changing systems, also legislatively changed, which meant that there was a change in distribution when these funds would get to our students. So students are seeing middle class scholarship later than they would before. That's not due to my SDSU, it's due to how the Student Aid Commission decided to allocate funds, when those funds would be available, and a CSU decision about when it would act on the inability of those things to be funded previously. One of the great things about middle class scholarship is that we've seen an increase in the number of eligible students. So we've seen a 100% increase in students who are eligible for the middle class scholarship, and we've been able to award those students. In the process of doing that, I think it's also important to remember that as a campus in our legacy system, we would have been weeks, if not months behind in terms of being able to award middle class scholarship. Because in the past system, with our distributed financial aid system, our distributed student information system, our distributed financial award system, we would have had to do all of the programming work to essentially develop the tools that would allow for us to exchange data with the Aid Commission. So the MySDSU effort gives us the ability to use platforms that are being built by the system. The benefit is that our students get aid faster. Don't in any way want to minimize the comments that have been made about the challenges in the first use of MySDSU. Administratively, there is lots that we are learning as a campus and trying to improve on. I think it's important to remember the reason that we are focused on this is to make sure that we could meet that mission critical need and also continue to support a system even in the SIMS legacy system that had become largely dysfunctional in a reliable way. If we move into admissions as our next area, right now we have sent out 16,653 admissions offers through MySDSU to first-year applicants. That's approximately the same volume as a year ago. Admission staff are now reviewing transfer applications, confirming eligibility for the second round of first-year admits. And our next milestone for undergraduate admissions will be in mid-March with the release of the remaining admissions decisions. That moves us to graduate admissions. Graduate admissions distinctly different because it works in cycles, has varying deadlines and timelines for the review and release of decision. Right now, working with the registrar and the Office of Admissions, the priority has been placed on reviewing candidates within priority cycle programs. They have the earliest deadlines. We have approximately 800 files that have been advanced to departments for reviews. Unit right now inside of admissions is evaluating another 1,800 files that are now complete. Graduate programs within the priority cycle have been asked to send list of preferred candidates to graduate admission staff to expedite this review, and Enrollment Services is aiming to release its first rounds of decisions within the next week and has reassigned several staff to move through the look at the documentation that we have. Talk a little bit briefly about waitlists. So waitlist process was also different. So waitlists opened on the first day of registration. They were open through January 24th. This is the first semester that we acted with the new Senate policy of a first in, first out waitlist. If you look at the size of our waitlist and then look at the addition of sections, the ebb and flow that we saw in waitlist management was comparable to what we had seen before. We also developed a set of new reports for waitlist management. As we move from waitlist into permission numbers, that data was moved into an archive. We've had good input from our chairs and department heads about the importance of being able to query that data in a live way as they look at the permission number use. That's something that we're working on. We also had a new administrative drop process. that required faculty in the new system to initiate that was an on-base document, notified the student, notified the faculty, and then notified a departmental coordinator. The departmental coordinator would then implement that change. 232 administrative drops were enacted for the spring semester. That's on average what we've seen ebb and flow over time. So same general area. In terms of support priorities, we, since the initiation of the phase of the project that started back in October, have had 2,263 ServiceNow tickets. We average about 50 to 60 new tickets coming in a day of differing severity. Our triage for looking at tickets first focuses on those that involve students getting into classes, students having problems with use of the system. The next move into faculty issues. In particular, those were the things that we're focused on for the start of the semester in terms of both usability and the first use of the system for some of these things. We still see a fair variety of access issues where folks who are beyond faculty or who are supplementing from a staff perspective, some of the functionality that's there need to have access. Those roles are things that we're in the process of implementing. And then the final area that our focus is on is making sure that we can get needed data, which was our focus in add drops, waitlist, and other. Right now, it's moving into the data that's required for automatic admissions, the beginning of the graduation cycle, and the measurement that we do of that. So that's a high-level overview. I want to open to questions.
Woo, take a big deep breath. Thank you so much for that comprehensive report. So you have several hands up. I first recognize Senator Carter Curtis.
Thank you, Chair Butler-Byrd. And thank you, Jerry, for all your hard work on my SDSU. As a staff member, enrollment was cumbersome, time-consuming, and pretty hellacious. Okay, so I just want to mention that I wanted to talk about enforcing prerequisites. That's something I didn't hear you address. That was the bulk of our problem. We had a bunch of students enrolled in classes in my department that didn't belong there, which made for a pretty, like I said, cumbersome process. How are you addressing that for the summer and fall enrollment?
Thanks very much, Senator Carter Curtis. So the process to look at prerequisites was defined by academic affairs. We had engagement with the colleges at the dean's levels to determine which requisites needed to be enforced. We moved from a system in the past that didn't have the system enforce the requisites to one that only enforced what the system would see. That essentially went from 200 things that had been enforced in SIMS to 500 things that are being enforced right now in my SDSU. So there was an increase in the number of requisites that were enforced. What then happened, Senator Carter Curtis, is a number of departments dealing with that issue early on ended up having a fair amount of exception reporting they were doing because the rules that had been created were done in such a way that the rule was written as an absolute, where in the past there had been an interpretation of other courses that met that need. In some departments, when that occurred, the department or the college made the decision to not continue to automatically enforce the requisite. When that occurred, we had students who came into classes who then needed to be later evaluated, and that process was time-consuming for faculty, also for staff in the process. So what we're doing right now in collaboration with the functional leadership in the office, the registrar, the associate deans, and the deans are going back and looking at the lessons learned from the use of this system for the first time in the requisites to determine if we need to change any of the rules, if we don't want to enforce as many requisites or not. I will say, when you look at the data on the administrative drops, when I said that it was average, it's on the low end of average. And so one of the things that we might be seeing is a difference caused by the fact that we're doing more actual enforcement by the system of the requisites. I think we have to think through if that's achieving the right goal or not. We have engagement with academic affairs to have that conversation, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Next question is Senator Sherman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Butler-Byrd. And thank you, VP Sheehan. I have sort of a specific question. Earlier on in the report, when you were talking about MySDSU and the student evaluation process, you mentioned that you and administration had consulted with CFA in regards to student evaluations. And I was just wondering if you could explain and elaborate what specifically you approached CFA about in regards to student evals, and also what specifically was CFA's response?
Sure. Since I didn't have those conversations directly, they were done by Sasha in consultation with Joanna. I'm not sure that Sasha is here. Joanna, is there any more detail that you can add there? If not, Senator Sherman, we certainly can get back with that detail after we consult with Sasha.
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everyone. Savannah, so when we saw that rates were around 35%, Sasha was not at work that week. And so I reached out with the permission of the Provost Office directly to David Berman and said, hey, we're thinking about not making these required for RTP processes. And he says, that sounds fine. We're not going through a formal meeting confer, but I spoke to David on the phone and it was a pretty quick agreement among all parties, just realizing that we've offered that in the past for PSFA building closure for COVID. That, I mean, this data is of marginal stability and use anyway. It's not fantastically scientific data. So everyone, I think, understands that this process is important, but it's certainly not essential that, you know, student evaluations that may have been subject to the vagaries of a pilot process, they don't have to be in people's RTP. Does that, I hope that answers.
Absolutely clarifies. Thank you so much. And thank you all for consulting with CFA as well.
Thank you both. Okay, Senator Somé, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have one for VP Sheehan and one for Brooks, Joanna Brooks. VP Sheehan, when do you think we could kind of like trust the system? When do you project that we will have done this cycle of reviewing and tweaking? The reason I'm asking is because I have functionalities that I could access before and suddenly I can't. And I don't quite understand why that's the case. And so how many times do I have to submit a service now just because something I could access before I can't at the moment? And my question to Joanna is, how can we ensure the validity of the data that we get from the student, you know, feedback that people get this semester? Because we still don't know whether the professor would be administering, you know, the grades before or after the students submitted their review. So would there be a line in their RTP or whatever paperwork we need to submit that would say when they would access or they accessed the student evaluations or let it happen? You know what I mean? So these are the two questions I have. Hopefully short answer.
Let me take the first. I'll let Joanna take the second. So Senator Somé, I think you can trust the system now, meaning the data inside the system is valid. I think what you're saying is your experience to what tools you have access to right now is inconsistent. Am I getting that?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely inconsistent. And I can't trust even the data behind it because of that, because I don't know.
Again, there's been no indication that there are any problems with any of the data in MySDSU.
I can't access students' transcripts right now. And so I don't know why.
Sure. So Senator Somé,
I could before.
I'd have to look at that in
Okay.
specific, but it's not that the data isn't there or the data is wrong. It's that we're trying to define the roles in a way that allows the great number of people that we have, for example, who act in an advising capacity to have access to the right records. So I'll have to look in your specific. You shouldn't have lost access to anything. If there are folks who have lost access to something that you had in MySDSU, if you'd follow up with me specifically, I'm happy to look into those and get back to you about why that happened.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And then,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was there just an aspect, and Nico, I want to make sure I understand your question about the validity of the data. So any faculty member who's concerned that a response rate or some other contingency of the pilot program impacted the quality of the student feedback survey outputs for spring 23 just doesn't have to include them in their files.
Right.
The question of scheduling them for semesters going forward so that there's, consideration of how to time them appropriately with regard to the grading period is to be determined. And that's going to happen through the shared governance process. I've asked Mike Borstrom to take a number of these questions to Allison Abel and the Faculty Affairs Committee. So there'll be a robust discussion there in time for them. Yep. Does that answer?
No. Sorry.
Well, the
but
other
I don't want to spend too much time on it. Maybe I could just ask
I
you
will offer
privately.
the validity of the data on student feedback surveys in general is understood via peer-reviewed research to be very low for doing anything other than tracking an individual instructor's ups and downs in their professional development over time. Most scholars, evidence-backed, peer-reviewed research say that it is not actually reliable data for comparing one to another or to some imagined mean or median, and happy to provide the citations on that.
Okay, this is about student feedback, so it's independent of the research part. So, but anyway, maybe I'll just contact you on offline. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Camper, you're recognized.
There we go. Thank you, VP Sheehan. I just had a quick question, and perhaps this is something I've missed in email. Does your office, or is there some process set up for faculty, official faculty and staff feedback about this rollout in terms of, suggestions from our own experience about going forward, other than just the, help desk?
Yes, Senator Kemper. So two answers. One, the first is that right now we are using ServiceNow to get that comprehensive information. That information will then be shared with a working group inside of Senate IIT. And our hope is in this semester to use the faculty representations in that group to coalesce other input. We've gotten a fair amount of input on data that's needed, on usability issues, all of those things, we're sensitive to. What we want to do is make sure that we have a comprehensive overview of them, then get the faculty and shared governance voice as to the most important things that we want to focus on. So right now, ServiceNow is the first ingest. That will then lead to a conversation that'll be more committee driven out of the Senate IIT working group as a component.
Thank you. Senator Abel Mills, you're recognized.
Hi, and I apologize in advance if my voice is a little hoarse. So thank you very much. You got through an amazing amount of information in a short period of time, and I certainly don't want to nitpick you on, a few things which I'm sure is how you spend a lot of your time. I had one question about really about support for two different areas that you mentioned, and one is financial aid. Because one of the things I learned today is that for students who are given scholarships through Aztec scholarships, they can only receive those scholarships. In some cases, their loan amount has to be adjusted and decreased so that they can receive the scholarship, which I'm not sure that has ever been given information to people applying for Aztec scholarships, but regardless of that, in the case where that happened and a student who received a scholarship, her loan adjustment had to be made. It was made and somehow then it was triggered a loan. And she spent over 7 hours on wait for financial aid. She had to go to class. She had to get off. She waited for 7 more hours for financial aid. And they said, don't do the training and then you won't get the loan. Fine. So she didn't do the training. And then the loan appeared in her bank account. And on the SDSU side, it said you did the training. On her side, it said you never did the training. 7 more hours waiting for financial aid. She missed the deadline. Now she has to cut a check for $15,000 to pay back a loan she never wanted in the first place. While I recognize that that is all outside of your control, I'm mostly concerned about the 21 plus hours that the student spent and had to continue leaving to try to get some answers from financial aid. And I think this is a broader question of staff support across the board, because it's going to segue into my next concern, which is with graduate admissions. I run our master's admissions. We're a priority cycle. We get over 500 applications every year. And it's come to my attention that Margarita Pena-Harla, who does a phenomenal job, is working with 2 people who are running all of graduate admissions. And because of this, understandably, their unit is far behind in processing transcripts. And so we're being asked to do like a multi-tiered review, which we have 5 faculty. We do a holistic review process. We can't really do a multi-tiered review. And so transcripts are getting lost, which I don't think is Margarita's fault. I don't think it's my SDSU's fault, but I think that the understaffing is really causing problems that I don't think, Jerry, is my SDSU's problem. But I think it's coming back to look like it's your problem because there's just not bodies. And so I guess maybe I'm piling on a question that isn't for you to answer because you're not in charge of staffing all of these, but unfortunately it came up with multiple areas that you talked about where understaffing is causing us to lose out on phenomenal graduate school applicants. It's causing doctoral students to have to write $15,000 checks for loans they never wanted. It's causing them to miss class almost, to be on hold for 21 hours to get in with the virtual financial aid center. And I think that, you know, as the frustration level is starting to go across the board with students, with faculty, with, you know, I'm manually today checking prerequisites, going back to Senator Carter Curtis's question because I am in charge of our online program at through Global Campus, and I'm manually checking all the prerequisites for all of our students who are going through that because that hasn't been set up yet somehow. And I understand again that things are going to get better, but I'm really concerned that things are not going to get better fast enough. And faculty and staff are falling apart.
So thanks very much for the comments and the questions, Senator Abel Mills. There are some subject matter experts here who I think can help address some of the specifics, but let's talk generally about things overall. You know, as we began this transition to avoid what would have been the inability to grant financial aid, we had COVID, the economic impact, the early exit program, and the Great Reassessment. In the project team alone, and this is not across the university, but just in the units that are directly impacted, you have 55 less staff than when we started with. We know as a starting point that SDSU is not overstaffed ever in financial aid. It was not overstaffed in registration. It was not overstaffed in graduate admissions. So those loss of staff and the fact that we have a new system, and then we have things like the middle class scholarship changing the rules, have led to a perfect storm that is an awful lot of workload right now. So if you look at financial aid in particular, financial aid a year ago, their contact points were roughly about 4,700 students that they dealt with in the month of January. This year, it was 10,000. 10,000, while they also have, I believe, 8 vacancies right now, caused because of that inversion and the challenges. That's what leads to the wait. What's happening right now, because the focus in these areas is on making sure that we get back to the student service, is people who are technical are being pulled from technical configuration to appropriately deal with students when we have these dramatic workloads. Let me ask Rose, as our lead in financial aid, to talk a little bit more about that. And I think she can give you, probably without getting in specific to the student that you're talking about in question, which wouldn't be appropriate, just the fact that aid often goes through this dynamic dance that you're talking about of readjustment. The challenge right now is some of the latency due to change in system, change in rules in system, and all of that taking place when we have a dramatic loss of staff. Rose?
Sure. Thank you, Jerry. And yes, thank you for sharing the volume that the Student Financial Center has experienced over just this 1 month. But going back to just financial aid basics. So anytime a student receives $1 of federal or state financial aid, we have a cap, which is called the cost of attendance. So when a student receives a federal loan, we have a cost of attendance that is made up of tuition fees, housing, books, supplies, rent, and transportation. So in the case that you're speaking of, I am going to assume this was all a timing issue of when the scholarship was awarded to the student, whether it was a foundation scholarship due to research or was an Aztec scholarship. When a student's aid package is determined, it's based on what we know at that given point in time, but also we apply that cost of attendance cap. So if a student is awarded their total cost of attendance for living on campus is about $32,000. If we disperse that federal and state aid 3 weeks later, they get an outside scholarship or an Aztec scholarship, we are required by federal regulations to readjust their aid package. So to ensure compliance and to ensure that the university can continue to administer federal and state aid, we do that. So we try to get everything in line, but as you know, perfect storm here. We've had a lot going on. Oftentimes, and this happened before the conversion to my SDSU, we get notification of outside aid or even Aztec scholarships or even research scholarships later in the semester that require us to evaluate the student's aid package. And we try to communicate that to students as to the why. We work with our development officers, we work with our folks in foundation, we work with a lot of faculty across campus on notifying the financial aid office sooner than later when they're dealing with research grants or scholarships. And that's why we have different scholarship cycles so that we can ensure that aid packages are adjusted in a timely manner that fits a student schedule and not necessarily our schedules. So in this case, what you can do is have the student reach out to me. I can walk them through what happened to their financial aid. And again, we apologize for the long wait times. The staff in the Student Financial Center have been working long hours, keeping the center open till 6, 7 o'clock at night to ensure that we can help everybody. Because the Student Financial Center is not only serving students regarding financial aid and scholarships, the center is a one-stop shop for also billing issues. So students who have outstanding bills or have questions about installment plans, they're all coming through the center. And a university of our size, 36,000 students, I am proud of the staff that they've been able to help over 10,000 students in the month of January, giving everything that they've had going on. But anytime anybody on this Zoom, you have any issues with students, feel free to reach out to me and so I can help them or help you understand the process.
And then Senator Abel Mills, I think it would be great. I know that we've got AVP Hyman, who Margarita reports to, if he could share with us sort of the staffing issue in graduate admissions and how they're approaching that to comprehensively answer your question.
Sure. Hello again, everyone. And Allison and I have been kind of chatting behind the scenes, but yes, known gap, known structural limitation. Some positive news is that we're interviewing for 2 of those vacancies right now. We'll hopefully have some new bodies in there, and a 3rd vacancy is only a temporary one from someone who had to go out on medical leave and should be back very shortly. Also trying to secure funding for 2 additional graduate evaluators, because I think we're going to need this type of support long-term, especially with growth out of a graduate in many programs being planned. Temporarily for now, we were reassigning 7 other staff members from within enrollment services to support getting caught up on the backlogs.
Thank you. Senator O'Neill, you're recognized.
So my question is about the new EMPL IDs that are used in the new system. In particular, this is a new 9-digit ID number that now seems to coexist alongside the old 9-digit red ID number. I found this particularly confusing sort of as an advisor because different parts of the system you require different IDs. So for instance, in the faculty center, we're doing things with rosters and stuff that will accept the EMPL ID, but not a red ID. For degree evaluations, it'll only accept a red ID and not an EMPL ID. My SDSU seems to only show, at least on rosters, only shows the EMPL ID. Canvas only shows the red ID. And so I guess my question is, one, can you speak to what the reasoning was for needing to bring in a new 9-digit ID number? And 2, is one of these going to be phased out? And if so, when can we expect more sort of consistency in where the different ID numbers are used?
Yeah, thanks very much, Senator O'Neill, for that question. So the reason that there are 2 numbers right now is PeopleSoft creates a unique identity for any record that it has in the system that's referred to as the EMPL ID. That's when you hear that language, the EMPL ID is the employee ID. That's the unique identifier. So the system does that. That's the thing that the system has baked in the way that it creates a data record. The challenge that SDSU had and the way that we've approached it is SIMS also did the same thing. So in legacy, you have a red ID And in my SDSU, you have the Ample ID. The system uses right now the Ample ID for anyone who is newly admitted. The only thing that they will ever know is their Ample ID, and their Ample ID is actually their red ID. For everyone who was here before, they exist in this world in which the two systems have different records and ways of looking at them uniquely, which is why we have the lookup tool. So when you're looking in my SDSU, it's going to rely on the Ample ID. When you're looking at something that's legacy, that legacy system would draw from SIMS, which had the red ID. This will phase out over time. Everyone within the next 3 years will only have the Ample ID, but it'll be referred to, because it'll be printed on the card, et cetera, as the red ID. Does that clear up that question, Senator O'Neill? If not, I'd be happy to talk to you more in depth about it. Know that this is a difference, and it's because of how the systems generate the uniqueness of the data in the first place.
That does answer my question. I would recommend, especially if we're going to be also eventually calling the new IDs red IDs, definitely making that distinction clear to everybody. I don't feel like it was very well advertised that we were getting new ID numbers. I sort of had to figure out manually that, oh, this number isn't being accepted, and the ones that are printed here start with a different number. Maybe this must be a different number, and had to sort of figure out from that these were different. So thank you for that comment. Appreciate the change communication input. We'll see if we can do better as we communicate in the future. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Senator Aguilar, you're recognized.
Thank you. My concern is that given that we're a branch campus, our financial aid person does not have the authorization to make any changes, or if students have concerns, it takes quite a bit longer for the response to come from San Diego. And I think it would be beneficial to our campus to have someone on campus who has some kind of authorization or access to helping our students. Thank you.
So thank you for that comment. Financial aid moves again under student affairs with Rose as the lead for the campuses. Do you want to comment on that at all, Rose?
So, and I apologize, are you out at the IB campus?
That's correct.
Okay, so we do have support staff out there that work directly with staff here in the main campus. So we deal with IB every day. And so if there is something that's falling short or not getting done in a timely manner, could you please chat me separately or via email?
I will. I'll CC Georgette Astorga, who is our person for financial aid.
She is.
Like I said, I know she is in communication with you, but just as an advisor, sometimes I see students really struggling with getting answers or replies from financial aid.
So Georgette has direct contact with our staff, attends all the trainings, attends all our Student Financial Center information sessions. So yeah, let's talk offline and we'll see what's happening out there.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And our final hand up is Dean Love. You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Chair Butler-Byrd. I just wanted to add a little more information about graduate admissions. We have been working very closely with AVP Hyman and Vice President Sheehan to come up with a strategy to allow our graduate programs a way to move forward with admissions. Right now, it's not perfect, but it is an approach that won't stall the process and will hopefully allow for us to keep our enrollment admissions, sorry, not enrollment, our admissions letters out in a timely fashion so that we don't see a negative impact when it comes to our graduate enrollment numbers. The provost has been receptive and has heard the need for increased staffing, as AVP Hyman spoke of, and there's a push to get that on track.
Thank you, Dean Love. And thank you, VPIT Sheehan, for your comprehensive report. We do have an election update, so I'm going to defer to Chair Marks for an update.
Okay, thank you, Chair Butler-Byrd. So unfortunately, we did not elect anyone with 50+% of the vote. So I'm going to just, I also realized that last time I did not present the numbers because I was trying to avoid swaying the vote, but I think this time, I think as per policy, I should present the vote. So I'm going to present the vote totals and then let everyone know that I'll be, again, as soon as I'm done presenting the vote totals, we'll be releasing one more ballot via email. Those of you who get the email ballot are eligible to vote. Please vote as quickly as you possibly can so we can try to finish this off today. So just going through the vote totals now, we received 81 total votes cast, and we needed 42 to elect. And so the first candidate, Robert Meffe, received 28. Leon Chen was 39. Tim Tully was 20. Asafa Bayen was 28, and Eric Felix was 37. So those were the vote totals for round 2, ballot number 2. I will now submit or send off ballot number 3 to everyone. Please try your best to vote as quickly as you possibly can. And for those of you who did not receive a ballot, I will send you the ballot link in the chat.
Okay, Chairman, can you paste those numbers into the chat, please?
I'll do that as soon as I send off the ballot. I'll put those in there for you. Yeah.
Point of information.
Yes.
Yes.
How long are we going to repeat the cycle?
Until we vote, until we elect.
And if we don't get a 50%, then what? Today, I mean?
Well, I believe we're gonna, I mean, it looks like we're gonna probably be continuing our Senate meeting on Thursday anyway.
Okay.
So we're just gonna continue voting.
Okay,
so
thank you.
I believe in all of you. You can do this. All right. So let's do it. All right. I'll send off all the information in the chat for you, Nola.
Thank you very much, Chair Marks. And thank you everybody for hanging in there. As Chair Marks just stated, it looks like we will we will have to recess and resume on Thursday, but we're going to do everything we can to finish as much as we can today. So I'd like to have our Associate Students President, AS report. President Moore is recognized.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for having me again. I wanted to report on a few things. First, I wanted to start with something that we did last semester, which was an AS resolution to reaffirm our commitment as Associated Students to shared governance. We really think that that's such an important pillar on our campus, and we want to continue. Really, our existence as a organization is to be that student voice and be able to provide that perspective. So we are reaffirming the commitment to shared governance so that we can be that voice in every space and part of every decision that we can be a part of made on this campus. So I will put a link in the chat towards the resolution if anybody would like to look at it. It was passed through our board of directors, so it is officially on our website now, and I'm really proud of that. That was one of our major goals as Associated Students, to put a priority on shared governance. So us doing that was really cool. We are getting into election season now. Sadly, that means that my term is almost coming to an end. I had a really fun time being the president, and I'm looking forward to seeing the next leaders that are going to step into this organization and just keep continuing to elevate. I really decided this year was going to be a foundational year to continue to build the culture post-COVID, and I think that we've been able to do that, and we're looking forward to the next leaders continuing on and carrying that torch. Previously, during the winter break, some AS leaders did get to go to Oaxaca on an immersion experience led by Dr. Ramona Perez, and we got to really just immerse ourselves in the culture and learn a little bit about the Mixtec and the Zapotec and just a Mesoamerican culture as a whole that ultimately influenced us being the Aztecs. So it was really important to learn about that history and how rich it is to indigenous, because Oaxaca, if you don't know, is one of the most indigenous places in Mexico. And we got to see our Mesoamerican Center, which was really cool. So, and see the different work that, a lot of researchers are doing down there. And finally, I do want to report that we are starting our Mending Minds initiative this semester, which is basically going to be a push on mental health. It's to show our mental health resources that we have and how to just utilize it. We, coming back from COVID, we really just want to have a priority on students' mental health so that they can be best both inside and outside the classroom. And that's pretty much the end of my report. Is there any questions?
Seeing no hands up. I just really want to thank you, President Moore. It has been such an honor working with you. And I know that resolution had your heart and soul in it, and we're really glad that you brought it forward to us. Thank you for everything.